You've been calling it 100 different things. Anger issues, commitment problems, self-sabotage, drinking too much or feeling too much or shutting down completely, pushing people away and then sitting alone wondering why no one stayed. And you've probably tried to fix them one at a time. Therapy for the anxiety, willpower for the drinking, promising yourself you'll stop doing this time. You'll let them stay. You won't ruin it again. And no matter how many times you try, the same patterns keep showing up. Same cycles. Same endings. Same people leaving. Because those were never separate problems. They were always the same wound showing up in different rooms of your life. And that wound has a name you were never told. Let me tell you about a boy named Adam. His story might sound familiar. Adam was still a kid when he stopped listening to what people said and started listening to everything else. How fast a door closed. How heavy a footstep was. Whether someone said hello when they walked in or whether they skipped it. That told him more than words ever did. The front door was the first thing he learned. A quiet close meant safe. A slam meant something was coming. He figured out that Tuesday nights were worse than Mondays. That payday weekends could go either way. That the sound of ice dropping into a glass after 9 p.m. meant go to your room and don't make a sound. His mother was usually already in the kitchen by the time his father came home. She'd be wiping the counter, the same counter she'd already wiped twice. She didn't look at Adam or say anything, but her hands moved faster. And Adam learned from watching her what he wouldn't understand until he was grown. He learned to spot danger in her body before he ever learned to hear it in his father's voice. She was his early warning system. When her shoulders went up, Adam went quiet. At school, his teachers called him mature and well-behaved, a pleasure to have in class. But Adam wasn't good. He was careful. And the difference was invisible to everyone, including Adam. One afternoon, his teacher raised her voice at another student across the room. Had nothing to do with Adam, but his whole body flinched. Just for a second. He recovered before anyone noticed and sat back up and kept writing. But his body had reacted to someone else's anger like it was pointed straight at him. He thought every kid did this. He thought every kid listened for footsteps at night. He thought every kid knew the difference between a door that closed and one that slammed. He thought this was just what houses sounded like. It wasn't. But by then, the listening was already built into him, and it never stopped running. When a child grows up in a house where things change without warning, the brain adapts. The threat system stays on. The part that scans for danger starts firing more often than it should. In a safe home, that system learns to settle. In Adam's home, it never did. He wasn't overreacting. His brain was doing the job that house trained it to do. Hypervigilance. Adam wouldn't learn that word for years, but his body already knew it by heart. And it didn't turn off when the house changed. It followed him into classrooms and friendships and jobs, and every room he walked into after that, it decided how he read every person, every conversation, every relationship from that point on. If you grew up reading rooms before you walked into them, you learned to read people before they ever spoke, that has a name. Hypervigilance. A few years later, Adam figured out a trick. When things got loud at home, when the yelling started or the silence got too heavy or the ice clinked one too many times in the kitchen, he could leave without leaving. His body would stay in the room. But the rest of him would go somewhere else entirely. He'd lie in bed and stare at a spot on the ceiling, count tiles and lines on his hand and cracks in the plaster, anything with a pattern. And slowly, the noise would get far away. Like someone was turning the volume down on the whole house until it was just a hum. One night, his father was yelling at his mother in the kitchen. Adam was in his room, one wall between them. He could hear every word through the plaster. He started counting the books on his shelf. By the time he reached 23, the yelling was gone. He couldn't hear anything. His whole body felt like cotton, like he was wrapped in a thick blanket very far away, like he'd found a room inside himself where none of it could reach. He didn't know there was a word for this. He just called it the trick. The thing he did when the world got too loud. At school, they said he daydreamed and lost focus and didn't apply himself. His mother called him lazy. His father said nothing. and somehow that was worse. His anger had a shape to it. You could hear it coming and brace for it. The silence had no shape. It could be nothing or the last 5 seconds before everything came apart. In that house, silence was its own kind of threat. Years later, a therapist would give it a name: dissociation. When a child is trapped in a situation they can't fight, can't run from, and can't stop, the brain disconnects. It pulls back from what's happening. Adam wasn't lazy and he wasn't daydreaming. His brain was building an exit in a house that didn't have one, and it worked. The only problem is that trick doesn't come with instructions for getting back. And by the time Adam actually needed to feel things, really feel them, that door had been open for so long, he'd forgotten which side of it was real. His mother did it too. She heard the same sounds through the same walls. She wiped the counter and looked away and said nothing and let it continue. Adam didn't learn to disappear from nowhere. He learned it from the one person who was supposed to stay present for him. She couldn't. She was disappearing too. By middle school, Adam could sit in a room full of people and feel absolutely nothing. He thought that meant he was finally strong, and eventually, he didn't just leave the bad moments. He left the good ones too. Dissociation does that. It saves you, and then it takes everything else with it. In high school, Adam hit someone. It happened fast. A kid in the hallway bumped his shoulder and said, "Watch it!" And everything inside, Adam cracked open. He grabbed the kid by the shirt and shoved him into the lockers hard enough to hear the metal ring. A teacher was there in seconds, pulling them apart. Adam stood there, breathing like he'd been running, his hands still shaking. And the thing that scared him most wasn't the fight. It was that, for about 3 seconds, standing there with his fist balled up and his jaw locked, he had felt exactly like his father. The same posture, the same heat behind his eyes, the same hands. He got suspended. His mother came to pick him up. She sat in the principal's office with her purse on her lap and said, "I don't know what's wrong with him." His father, later that night, said, "That's what happens when you don't discipline them enough." Adam was in his room, listening to them downstairs, talking about him, and he realized a quiet, terrible thing. This was the most he'd heard his parents talk to each other in months. The only time they connected was when they were discussing what was wrong with their son. He was the problem that gave them a reason to agree on anything. After that, the anger was the only thing people saw when they looked at him. He became the angry kid with the short fuse, the one you don't push. They never asked what changed. They never asked what the anger was protecting. Here's what happens with anger in boys. People don't ask what happened to him, they ask what's wrong with him. And after hearing that enough times, he starts asking it too. Every adult in that principal's office missed what they were actually looking at. When a child pushes feelings down for years, they don't disappear. They build. And the part of the brain that helps you pause before reacting develops through calm, safe, consistent connection. Adam didn't get that, so when those feelings finally pushed through, they came out unfiltered. The kid in the hallway wasn't the cause. He was the first place it broke through. Feelings don't go away when you stop showing them. They just lose their names. And when they finally come out, they come out as rage and broken things and the look on your face that makes everyone around you say he's turning into his father. He wasn't becoming his father. He was drowning in everything he'd never been allowed to feel. But no one said that to him. His teachers didn't say it. His mother didn't say it. The principal with the incident report didn't say it. So Adam believed the version everyone else seemed to agree on. That he was the problem, so he became nothing at all. And people didn't see the years behind the explosion. They just saw the outburst and walked away. The clinical term is emotional dysregulation, but it just felt like being out of control. Adam had his first drink at a house party, a friend's apartment. Someone handed him a red cup and he didn't think about it. He just drank it. And for the first time in his life, his body unclenched. It wasn't the dissociation kind of quiet, the cotton-wrapped, gone from the room quiet he'd learned as a kid. This was warm. This felt like what he imagined normal people felt like all the time. Like his muscles remembered how to let go of a thing they'd been gripping since before he had words for it. Before long, Adam was the guy at every party. Funnier when he drank, easier, more relaxed. People said he was a good time, and somewhere inside that compliment was a truth nobody could say out loud. They liked the version of him that wasn't really him. They liked the Adam that alcohol built, the one that could laugh without checking every face in the room first. 3 nights a week became every night. Every night became the thing he planned his day around. His friends said he was fun. His girlfriend said he drank too much. His doctor asked how many units per week, and he cut the real number in half without even thinking about it. Then he sat in his car after the appointment. Engine off, windows up, and he heard it. Ice in a glass. The same sound that used to mean danger in his father's kitchen after 9 p.m. The one that meant go to your room and be quiet. And now it was coming from his own hand. He was sitting in a parking lot holding the same thing he'd spent his childhood running from, and he couldn't tell if that meant he'd escaped or if it meant he'd lost. His mother called that week. She sounded tired. She asked if he was eating enough, asked about work. She didn't ask if he was happy. She didn't ask if he was drinking. She didn't ask any of the questions that actually mattered. And sitting there listening to her talk around the edges of everything, Adam understood what he'd never been able to say out loud. He learned how to avoid the truth from her. He learned to look the other way from the person who spent his entire childhood looking the other way. She taught him that the real things stay unspoken, and he'd been living by that lesson ever since. The drinking worked. That's the part nobody wants to say out loud, but it did. For a short window, it gave his body what childhood never did. Quiet. Relief. A break from being on alert all the time. That's why these patterns get such a grip. It's not about weak willpower. It's about finally finding a thing that makes your nervous system let go. The tragedy isn't that Adam drank. The tragedy is that a bottle did in 20 minutes what his parents were supposed to do for his entire childhood. If that part felt personal, sit with it for a second. Whatever you've been using to get through the day, whether it's drinking or food or work or staying so busy you never have to sit still. It makes sense. You found a thing that worked when nothing else did. The problem was never that you found it. The problem is that nobody gave you a better option first. Adam found a way to turn everything down. The feelings, the anger, his whole body. He got it to a place that almost passed for calm. But he couldn't turn down the pattern. And the pattern was about to cost him the one person who actually tried to stay. If you need a drink to unwind, if you need to stay busy to avoid sitting with yourself, if you found a thing that quiets your body when nothing else can, your nervous system found its own medicine. Doctors call it self-medication. Years later, Adam met someone good. Her name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what she did. She was patient. She asked him how his day was, and then she waited. Actually waited. Didn't fill the silence or try to guess. Just sat there and let him find the words, and he felt almost nothing. This steady, quiet thing where a feeling was supposed to be. She didn't make him guess. She didn't disappear for 3 days and come back acting like it never happened. She just showed up every day the same way, and Adam's body had no idea what to do with that. Calm didn't feel like calm to him. Calm felt like the space right before everything goes wrong. Every good night in his parents' house had been followed by a bad one. His body had learned that so deeply that peace and danger felt exactly the same. One Sunday, she was on the couch reading, her feet tucked underneath her, book open on her lap. Everything was fine. The apartment was quiet, and Adam's skin started crawling because nothing was happening. The quiet felt like the quiet in his childhood house, the one that always came right before everything fell apart. His body needed the room to feel like a place he knew how to survive in. So he said a sharp thing about the dishes, about how she was always on her phone. A comment small enough to deny, but pointed enough to shatter whatever this piece was. She looked at him, didn't yell, didn't fight back. Just said, "Why do you do that?" Adam didn't have an answer. At least, he didn't have one he could say out loud. The real answer was that the quiet was scaring him, and he needed this room to feel like a familiar place. But he didn't have those words yet, so he said nothing. and she watched him say nothing, and they both knew what that silence meant. This wasn't the first time. She'd watched the pattern for months. Get close, feel the peace, break the peace, apologize, repeat. She tried talking about it, and he shut down. She gave space, and he drank. She stayed, and he pushed harder. She was running out of ways to reach someone who pulled away every time she got close enough to matter. She left on a Tuesday. She closed the door gently. Just a quiet click. And somehow that sound hit harder than any slammed door from his childhood. Because this one belonged to him. He sat on the couch and knew. He had felt himself pushing her away while it was happening, and he still couldn't stop. Being close to someone safe felt exactly like waiting for everything to go wrong. And this probably wasn't the first time someone left like this. And if nothing changed, it wouldn't be the last. When a child's first experience of love is unpredictable, the brain builds a template for what love feels like. And that template follows them into every relationship after. She was right next to him on that couch, and his body was reacting like she was a threat. His body never learned any other way to be close to someone. This is the part that costs the most. The childhood is over. You survived that part. It's what the childhood keeps taking from you now. The relationships you can't let work. The people you push out because your body still can't tell the difference between someone getting closer and a situation about to go wrong. They tried. You know they tried. And you watched yourself make it impossible for them to stay. Adam told himself what he'd always told himself. I'm not built for this. I'm not someone people stay with. But that story was older than he was. And he'd never once stopped to ask who wrote it. If you push people away when they get close, if peace makes you nervous, if you keep losing people you actually wanted to keep, your body is running an old pattern. Disrupted attachment. It was a Thursday. Adam was sitting in his car in the parking lot outside his apartment. It was an ordinary day. There was no fight, no bad conversation. He had nothing he could point to. Just a normal Thursday, and Adam sitting there with the engine off and his hands on the wheel, and no ability to move. He wasn't numb. That was the strange part. He wasn't angry, and he wasn't checked out, and he wasn't behind any of the walls he'd spent years building. They'd all just quietly fallen away, one by one, and what was underneath was a thing he'd been carrying since before he could speak. He believed he was the problem. He didn't believe bad things happened to him. He believed he was the bad thing. That every relationship that ended, every job he lost, every night alone, every person who eventually gave up, all of it proved what he'd suspected since he was a child. That he was wrong at the root. That belief didn't start with Adam. It started with a child trying to make sense of a house that didn't make sense. A child can't look at a parent and conclude this person is hurting me and I don't deserve it. So the mind reaches for the only explanation it can hold. If this is happening, it must be because of me. That belief gets locked in early before the child has the language to question it. And then it follows them for years, sitting underneath every good thing and waiting to tell them it won't last. Toxic shame has a clinical name, but the name doesn't capture what it actually feels like. It feels like apologizing before anyone has blamed you. Like scanning every room for proof that you don't belong there. Guilt says I did a bad thing. Shame says I am the bad thing, and this kind of shame doesn't appear on its own. It gets put there through blame, neglect, and being made responsible for feelings that were never yours to carry. The child absorbs it so deeply that it stops feeling like a thought and starts feeling like truth. That's what was sitting in the parking lot with Adam. The thing underneath the anger and the drinking and the numbness and the pushing people away. All of those were just ways of managing the one thing he could never get away from. And he was so tired of carrying it. If you carry a belief that you are the problem, if that belief has been there so long it doesn't feel like a belief anymore, it just feels like who you are, that's the deepest layer. Toxic shame. Then one night, alone in his room, someone finally gave all of it a name. It was late, and Adam was alone, the way he usually was by then. Screen open in front of him, scrolling the way people do when they're not looking for anything specific, but can't bring themselves to close the laptop and sit with the quiet. He found a video, or an article, Or maybe it was a post someone shared that he almost kept scrolling past. But the title stopped him. And as he read, his life started doing a thing it had never done before. It started making sense. It didn't look like a collection of things he'd done wrong anymore. It didn't look like evidence that he was broken. It looked like a pattern. One clear pattern that connected every chapter of his life back to the same starting point. The kid who listened for footsteps and flinched when someone raised their voice across the room. Hypervigilance. The boy who counted books until the yelling disappeared. Dissociation. The teenager who exploded in a hallway over a small thing because years of feeling had been building with nowhere to go. Emotional dysregulation. The young man who found relief in a drink because his body had never learned any other way to come down. Self-medication. The adult who pushed away someone safe because peace felt like the thing that always comes before the storm. Disrupted attachment. And underneath all of it, the belief that he was the problem, decided before he could speak. Reinforced every time someone looked at him and saw a difficult kid instead of a scared one. Toxic shame. All of it has one name: complex PTSD. It was never anxiety. It was never depression. It was never his personality. It was a nervous system that learned to survive a childhood that wasn't safe and kept surviving long after the danger ended. Because without seeing that pattern, you keep trying to fix the wrong things, and nothing actually changes. And this is the part that matters. Complex PTSD comes from living inside that kind of environment for years. But what was shaped in relationship can also heal in relationship. Safe, steady connection teaches the body what it never learned early on. That closeness doesn't always come with a cost. That quiet can just be quiet. That you can put the armor down and still be okay on the other side. So if any part of Adam's story felt like yours, if you recognized yourself in that hallway or that parking lot or on a couch where someone good used to sit, try this. The next time that voice says, "I am the problem," don't answer it the way you always have. Instead of, "What is wrong with me?" ask, "What happened to me that made my body learn this?" Because that question changes everything. It moves the weight off who you are and onto what you lived through. And what you lived through can be healed. You can put the armor down now. You made it out. You've just seen how all of these patterns were never random. They were your body trying to protect you. But naming it is only the first part. The part I'm still figuring out is what actually helps people start living differently once they see the pattern. I've been reading about it, talking to people who study this, and there's more to say. I'll be back next week with what I found.